Episode 3 of Ahsoka is out and we learn of a huge change to what the Force is. But is it really a change, or has it always been there right in front of us? I'm gonna explain this scene in full detail and what it means not only to George Lucas, but the future of Star Wars. So, let's get right into it. In this scene, we get to see a one-on-one moment between Ahsoka and Sabine. Sabine was feeling extremely discouraged and frustrated because she feels like her connection with the Force isn't growing, and she feels she's not ready when she needs to be right now for Ezra. Ahsoka tells her it will take time, but that's not what a lot of fans are debating about right now. The big debate is revolved around shortly after when Ahsoka tells Sabine that the Force resides in all living things. This is something that has always been around Star Wars, we just didn't realize it. For years as fans, we've always seen the Force as something like, well, you either have it or you don't. And Ahsoka kind of changes the theory of that. But did you know that George Lucas originally wanted this? It's just something that wasn't explored enough. Lucas stated that a lot of people get confused about the Force. They see it as some special thing that you can find and pick up and put it on your head and suddenly you have the Force. Whereas it's always been designed so that every living being has the Force. The amount of Force, which is like talent or intelligence, is different in every person. Some of it is inherited, but it's no more than a talent. It's not something you can acquire, it's something you can learn to use. I have the power to lift that cup off the table using the Force, but I can't do it unless I've been trained to do it. Now, what does this mean? Well, in simpler terms, anybody could use the Force, and George Lucas has been saying this for years, but it goes further than that. Let me break it down for you. Can anybody use the Force? Yes, but can anybody be gifted with the Force? No. Let's use Padme and Leia as two examples here. Now, Padme, as we know, has never used the Force, but she could have. You may ask, well, why didn't she just use it? Well, because it's up to the user to decide if they want to pursue and learn these Force abilities or not. What would take Padme 10 years to learn, Leia could learn overnight. Why? Because Leia was gifted with the Force through genetics. She's the daughter of the Chosen One. We see that in the original trilogy. Leia never knew or tested her Force abilities, but realistically had the same connection as Luke did. The reason why Luke was able to have these abilities and have such a bond with the Force was because of Obi-Wan and Yoda. They trained him. And remember, talent without training is nothing.
But talent without training is nothing.
The first we really see Leia have a connection to the Force was on Cloud City when she was able to sense Luke. And later on, we know that Leia begins to train with Luke to take her abilities to the next level. So going back, while Padme might have been able to use the Force if she was trained, her ceiling in what she could do is a lot lower than someone like Leia's. Imagine a 5'1" basketball player whose parents were scientists. Then compare that to a 6'9" tall basketball player whose parents were athletes. Both are training for basketball the same amount and work just as hard as one another. But who would ultimately be more successful? Well, the 6'9" tall player who's just more genetically gifted. So this is where George Lucas was getting here, and that's all dependent on midichlorians. Anakin had gifts right away as a young boy, and it's why Qui-Gon was able to notice so easily. He was advanced in his abilities, his reactions, his flying, and especially his building. An average 9-year-old couldn't do that, but because Anakin was so gifted with the Force and his midichlorian count was so high, it was why we saw him like this. So going back to Sabine, she's trying to explore this Force sensitivity, but ultimately frustrated because nothing's working. It's why Hewing says she's the worst Jedi he's ever seen. Because Hewing has spent centuries around nothing but Jedi and genetically advanced students, unlike Sabine, who has the same midichlorian count as Kermit the Frog. Okay, I'm kidding. Well, maybe not really. But anyways, we see Sabine struggle, we see her character grow, and by the end of the season, we could maybe see her do small things with the Force. I don't think anything major, but maybe she's able to pull the cup in with a lot of concentration. Regardless, I'm excited to see where this goes, and it's been very interesting to see Dave Filoni take on what George Lucas originally wanted. Despite the negative feedback the show has gotten for Sabine potentially being able to use the Force, it actually has been there in front of us this entire time. But what do you think about this, and what are your predictions for the rest of the series? Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you, always.